This video covers section 1.5, reading a standard Vernier caliper. So a Vernier caliper is more of a sliding scale. You're going to be using fractions on this, which makes it a little bit more tricky. So you might want to get a calculator out to see how this works together. So when we're doing this, I'm going to want you to show the work because everyone has to be on the same first fraction reading. The second one is going to be a little bit more subjective based on how directly you're looking at the actual reading itself. So you're going to be, I'll give you kind of a little bit of leeway on the second reading as long as the first reading is correct. So you've got to be in the ballpark, and that means the first reading has to be correct. So when you're reading this one, you're going to be reading the top two lines together. So these two are in inches, the bottom two are in millimeters, so we'll worry about those when we get to 1.7. So just to kind of point out, you can see of the same kind of pieces that you had in the other one where you're measuring the internal diameter, and here you can see your pieces where you would measure your thickness or your external diameter, and then at the end you have a piece. This goes out to 6 inches just like the dial caliper does. So notice that this piece right here is in 1/28. So that's why you're going to want a calculator, because it's going to be a little bit tricky to do this with addition. And then these are going to be your standard readings, like on a ruler, where they're in 16ths. So normally when we read something on a ruler, we reduce it to lowest terms as our final answer. But because I'm going to take this reading plus that top reading, you don't need to reduce it in advance. It's totally up to you. So the first piece that I'm going to look at is this 0 line right here. I need to see where it has passed on the main scale. So here I've got 1, 2, 3 sixteenths. So it's past the 3/16 line. It hasn't made it all the way to the 4. So I'm going to write 3/16 as my first measurement. So 3/16 everyone would have to have, because that's where that 0, not the edge, but the actual 0 line has passed that 3/16 marking. Then I'm going to look on this top scale, which we call the Vernier scale, and I want to see this is at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So each one of these is an individual whole number, and I want to see which one of these top lines lines up the most closely with the line below it. So here you can see that this 4, or no, the 4 is pretty close, but the 5 is identical. It lines up exactly. So that would be my 5. So I'd write that as +5, and then of course here's the scale, 1/28. So I would like to see this piece on your homework, and then I want to see the final answer where you've added them together, because I want to see which two fractions you chose to put them together. So if I'd said 4 or if I'd said 6, I'd be in that ballpark, so I'd be okay, but the 3/16 has to be exact. So when I add that together, I get 29 over 1/28. And again, this is in inches. Okay, so let's look at this one. So again, we're looking at the top two lines. So I want to see where that 0 has passed. Okay, so it's passed, and I can count over. And if I count over to this piece right here where it's passed, I've got 9/16. Plus, now I'm going to look to see what lines up the most closely, and I can see that this 4 is pretty close, pretty dead on. So I'm going to write +4 1/28, and when I add those together, I get 19 over 32 inches. So it's doing all the reducing and the adding for me at once, because 4 1/28 is not reduced, but that's okay. We're going to use what we have and then reduce it all at once. Okay, so for the next one here, I've passed the whole number of 1. So you want to be really careful that you're not just looking at the small pieces, but in general, how far have you moved on this caliper. So I've gone past the 1, and the 0 has passed the 10. So I've got 1 and 10/16. And again, I'm not going to worry about reducing that. plus. Now I'm really worried more about where does this line up. So as I look at this, again, I'm looking and I'm thinking that this 6 right here lines up really closely to that line. So I'm going to go with 6 1/28. And so you could give me one of two answers. It could be 1 and 43 over 64, or it could be the improper fraction of 107 over 64, and either one is in inches. Okay, for this one, this time I've passed the 2, so I need to make sure I mark that. So it's 2, and I've just passed the 1/16 mark. I'm just barely to the right of that 1/16. I'm not lined up, but I'm close. So I'm 2 and 1/16 plus, and then I want to see where I'm lined up. And if this time I'm lined up really closely with that 2, so you can use any of these numbers. I mean, a lot of times it seems like it's further down near the 4, but don't forget to look towards the front too. So that 2 is really nicely lined up. If you're in doubt, you can look at the line before it. The line before it is slightly to the right, and the line behind it is slightly to the left. So that puts that 2 right in the center. So we're going to go with 2 1/28. We're going to add those together, and again, you'll have one of two answers, 2 and 5/64, or 133 over 64, and these are in inches. Okay. So here, I like this one, it's nice and close up. So again, you're looking at where is everything lined up. So you can see that it hasn't quite gotten to this line. It's a little to the left of this line, and that's what you're looking for. So it's past this line right here. So this is going to give me 12/16. And then I'm going to look further down, and I see how it's shifted a little. So the 5 is a little to the right. The 6 looks pretty straight on, and the 7 is a little to the left. So again, that kind of confirms that it's a 6. So we're going to go with 6 1/28. I'm going to add those together, and I get 51 over 64 inches. So that's what I'm looking for on these. Okay, next one here. Okay, so I've gone past the 1, so I need to make sure I use that. So it's 1. I've gone past the 2, and that's 16ths. Plus, let's look at this line right here. And again, you can see the 3 is a little to the left, or to the right. The 5 is a little to the left, and the 4 is right on the center. So we want to go with 4 1/28. And when I add those together, I could get 1 and 5 over 32, or I could get 37 over 32, and these are in inches. Okay, let's do one more here. So this time I've passed the 3, so I've got 3, and I'm almost to the 4, so I'm at 13/16 plus, and again, that 4 is really nicely lined up. You're going to find 4 is going to be a very commonly used number. It's a nice one in the middle. It lines up a lot with these when you're off. So because we're measuring between the markings where the 0 is touching. So we've got 4 1/28, and we have 3 and 27 over 32, or we could have 123 over 32 inches. Now, I don't have any examples of this in this problem right here, but you may see it in the homework. The 0 line can also line up exactly on one of these marks. If the 0 were to line up exactly, not to be before or after a marking, then that would be just the whole number. It would be whatever it is. If it's 13/16 or whatever, and then you would just leave it as that number. You don't add the vernier scale unless it's between two of the markings on your scale here. This scale is showing you, it's showing you where it is between two numbers, and this vernier scale is giving you an idea of how far it is in. So we're measuring between those markings. If it's exactly on a marking, then there's nothing to measure in between, so don't add the vernier scale. So to practice reading some more of these photos, again, I have a whole section. You can see these in week 3. Chew.